Hello. We're doing this a bit early. We have a couple days left in December, but we figured Sir Chonk is like, what, a third?
A fifth.
Okay, a fifth of the way through a book, and I don't know what I'm going to start next. So, as a result, like, probably we won't finish anything in the next few days, and if we do, I'm just going to add it to January. We'll be fine, because we're doing all of our end-of-the-year stuff anyway. So, this is our December reading wrap-up, and I read a ton this month, because I did the Reindeer Readathon, so I'm going to try to be somewhat quick, because otherwise it would take forever. I think I read like 20-something books this month. All right, so my first thing is Alice Feeney's His and Hers, and this is a thriller about, essentially it's a murder mystery, and you have a journalist and a cop, and they, so it alternates between their narratives, but they have history. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but basically the idea is that there's two sides to every story. His side and her side. Sir Chunk is so interested he has gotten up and left us. But yeah, so this is a really solid thriller. I kind of started to maybe guess what was going on. I had a couple theories. One of them I was not liking. I thought it was going to go in one direction. I was like, oh, I hope it doesn't go in that direction. It's kind of overdone. And it did not. I kind of figured it out like before the reveal, but it's very well crafted, and I really enjoyed this. I had a hell of a time. It's like Alice Feeney's stuff. I read 3 of her books, I believe, Daisy Darker, Rock, Paper, Scissors, and this, and all of them are twisty, but also have like some emotional like potency. So, I really enjoyed this. I just thought it was very well done. And then the next one was The Mystery of Raspberry Hill. This is actually a Swedish, translated from Swedish, but it's a Finnish writer, and it's about a young, girl who is dying, of tuberculosis, and she's poor, and it's like around the turn of the century or early 20th century in Finland, and she's put in a sanatorium, and there's like this kid who keeps visiting her, and then there's, a whole wing was burned, and there's these doctors, and they seem really nice, and then there's one nurse who doesn't seem nice, and it's definitely way darker than a lot of like middle grade books, and I was kind of surprised. Like, I was like, wow, this is like going right in there for like discussions of like class division and like really talking about some dark things that have happened in history. But what I liked about it is that that's a good thing. I feel like I read some, darker middle grade books. I mean, Roald Dahl certainly wasn't like Puppies and Sunshine, and I think it's okay. Like, and I saw a lot of people were like, can't believe I would never want my middle grader reading this. This is too dark and depressing, and why would they need something like this? And I'm like, I mean, the thing is, like, the Finnish people have for like 10 years have been voted like the happiest country. Meanwhile, we have like a school shooting every week. So I'm going to go with like Finland having a better sense than we do. Like, how best to like, prepare children for life. And the next one I read was The Afterlife of Holly Chase, and I had done a bit of a review already on this. So, but I love this. It's a Christmas Carol retelling. It's fun. It's silly. It's cute. I was shocked at how much I love this, but one of my favorite books of the year. So absolutely loved it. Uzumaki, which I'm probably saying wrong, is a series. It's a manga series. Really cool art. Concept is interesting. It's basically all these people in this small town in Japan starting to go insane because they're seeing like spiral patterns and everything. And the concept was interesting. It just kind of got a little redundant, and also like the art's good, but like it didn't blow me away. And so what I kind of think about this is I described it as the Led Zeppelin of books, because I don't like Led Zeppelin as like a band. I don't like their music very much. but I also like respect that they're incredibly talented. And so that's kind of how I feel about this. It's like a pretty solid read, and I respect like that it was influential. I can see like why people really enjoy it. It's just on a personal level, I was like, it was fine. And so again, it's like Led Zeppelin. Like that's how I feel when I listen to their music. I'm like, I can appreciate why people like this. It doesn't do much for me. Kind of like opera.
J. Redondo.
Yeah. So then I read Eclipse by Wilder Poetry, which is a love story, a series of love poems between the sun and moon. And the art is gorgeous. The way the book is formatted is gorgeous. The poetry is beautiful. And I had just said recently with Sir Tonk that I really wanted to read more poetry that's like modern. Because I'm like, most of the poetry I read is from like 100 plus years ago. So I loved this. And I actually asked for more of this poetry for Christmas. And I got a second one from the in-laws. So I'll let you know how that goes when I ever eventually get to that.
Poems.
And I read Forecast from Stonehenge, which is a classic choose your own adventure, but has been redone into a graphic novel format. So again, choose your own adventure books are just always fun. So I wanted to see how it worked as a graphic novel. It works great as a graphic novel. And I think what's kind of nice about like this format is choose your own adventure, like historically when I was a kid, you know, they were just good for what did they call it back then when like you weren't reading a lot. Right now they call it reluctant readers. I don't think we were called that. We didn't have as much entertainment back in the day, so
you know, stitch a blanket, stare at a fire, read a choose your own adventure
right.
book.
So
you can work in the fields.
Yeah, so like a lot more people, which is actually kind of weird. A lot of people, when we were growing up, kids our age read, and then there was like a huge period of time where no one read. And I do think a lot more kids read now. Like it's way more common for younger kids than there was like a period though where kids didn't read. But I think this is nice. It's nice to take like that kind of like fun, engaging kind of kids who maybe normally wouldn't pick up a book for fun. And then comic books, which is also another way to get more reluctant readers to read. So you take like the choose your own adventure format, which is a very active reading, and then you take a graphic novel. So I think this is great. I hope they do more of this.
It's also one of the most famous henges of all the henge.
It's the famous
This is one
henge.
of the best henges that you have.
Yeah, wood henge is no longer in existence.
What about car henge? I think car henge is still around.
Yeah, that's
someone parked it somewhere else.
That's a nonsense American thing.
Henge.
All right, so then I read My Darkest Prayer by S.A. Cosby. And like I can see why this is a writer people like. I am just not one of those people. It's very like, there's a way to describe it, and I don't want to say it without coming across as obnoxious, but like...
Ooh, that's my thing. I'll say it. I don't know what it is, though.
It's like, I mean, it's set in the South, which isn't generally, apparently I'm not a fan of the South as a setting. And the characters are unlikable, which is, I think, kind of intentional. But I feel like the audience is very strongly male for this kind of book, and I am not. And I don't like books that are, like, about a bunch of toxic men being toxic. So, yeah, it's not for me. It just isn't for me. I mean, I tried. And, like, it's well written. It's just not my thing. And then on the opposite end of things, They Never Learn, which is about a serial killer who kills men who rape and abuse women, which I did love because, yes, go kill rapists. Like, I'm totally on board with that. There were some flaws in this, and I wanted to like it more than I did, and, like, I gotta be honest, the writing isn't very good, so it's kind of interesting, because I think My Darkest Prayer is way better written, but, like, content-wise, I didn't like the characters, I didn't like the story, I did not enjoy being around the people in the story, whereas this one, on a personal level, was very attached. It's about, like, violence against women, specifically on college campuses. There's a little bit of a twist, which I saw coming, partially because the way the twist is sort of foreshadowed is exceptionally well done. I've never seen anyone pull it off in this way, and this is the kind of thing that, like, if it was in, like, a movie, you'd call it out. I called it out as well, but, like, it took me a little longer. It's kind of like when you watch Sixth Sense and, like, you go, wait a second, and you ask yourself why certain things are happening, and you kind of just, like, write it off as, like, maybe bad writing or just, like, laziness on the part of the filmmakers. And then at the end you go, oh, it wasn't laziness. It was actually brilliant. And that's kind of the same type of thing. There was an element here that I was, like, getting kind of like, why is this happening like this? And then it worked really well. But as a whole, like, they threw in kind of like a romantic subplot that I just felt was unnecessary. And while I did like the ending, I did think it was, like, a little too, like, neatly tied up. So, but overall, I really liked it. And, I mean, again, on a personal level, I think I just connected to it. So then, because I got really excited by The Afterlife of Holly Chase, I decided maybe I do like romance.
You do.
I just don't like smut. So, like, maybe I don't mind cute romance. Because I do like some YA cute romance. So I decided I would read Emily Henry, because everyone said she is, like, the best for cute, fun, light romance. And I don't like it. So I don't know if it's me. Maybe she's just not for me. It just felt more like of an outline of a book than a book. Like, there was no actual action happening in the book. It was a lot of, like, her just telling us what was going on from the character's perspective. But, like, in no way, like, it didn't feel like it just felt like someone summarizing a book. Like, it felt like reading a SparkNotes summary. And, like, so I had no emotional connection. I did not care. And also the characters were kind of, like, obnoxiously, like, just not people I would know. Like, they're all just, like, a bunch of, like, rich, snotty people that I don't want to have anything to do with. So then, though, moving into one of my favorite books of the year, A House with Good Bones, which is T. Kingfisher, and every time she writes something and I read it, I realize how much more, I just fall more in love with her writing. So this is about a girl who, her mom, she's an archaeologist, well, she's a weird, like, bug archaeologist. So
they belong in a museum.
So she goes to archaeology sites, but she studies, like, the insects. They find, like, insect bits and stuff, and she's, like, studying, like, based on the insects, like, she can tell things about, like, how their food was kept. So it's really interesting. But her current research project, they, like, discovered, like, an old burial ground or something. So she's basically on hiatus while they work out all the legal stuff. And so she decides to go stay with her mom for a bit at the house she grew up in. And it's her mom's house now. Used to be her grandmother's house. And her mom's been acting weird. And her brother's like, I don't know what's going on with mom. And her mom's acting odd. She can't try to really figure it out. And then she's having some, like, weird things happen in the house. And then her neighbors are doing some weird things. But it was, like, laugh out loud funny, but also super creepy. And I was like, I didn't know horror could be cozy, but that is what this is. It is cozy horror. And I loved it. I can't recommend it enough. Absolutely loved it. Totally unlike anything else I've read. I mean, I didn't know this was a possible thing to make cozy horror. So, and that's what it is. Then I read The Butcher of the Forest, which is a short sort of novella fairy tale. It's a very dark fairy tale, where it's basically, pretty traditional fairy tale. These kids get lost in a forest, and supposedly, like, no one can get out of the forest. If you're in the forest for 24 hours, you die. And this evil king that is, like, taken over this, like, village, basically, is, like, there's this one woman who, she's been in the forest and survived and come back. And so he makes her go into the forest to find his kids. And, very, like, kind of reminds me of, like, a lot of, like, those, like, 80s fantasy movies, like Legend, Neverending Story, that kind of stuff. It's darker, but not like much darker, because those are pretty dark. Like when you watch them again as an adult, you're like, wow, these are really dark. Like when we were kids, maybe we didn't notice how dark they were, or maybe we just didn't care. But like, yeah, so it's like a lot of people are saying how dark this was.
Artax, no.
Oh. But yeah, so I mean, it's and again, it's like fairy tale as metaphor for like war and colonialism and so on. But yeah, really well written, beautifully written. I did feel like it was a little too like the ending didn't like totally pull together for me, but overall I really enjoyed it. Then I read Sisterhood Everlasting, which is the 5th Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants book, and I've had it forever, and I was like, should I read it? Should I not read it? I was going to read it eventually, and I was like, that's it. And as you know, this was on my 24 for 2024, but I was like making progress on stuff, and then I was like, I'm just going to read it, because I really want to read it. And I loved it, and even starting out at first, I was like, am I in for this? But like, I cried ridiculously throughout this. A couple times Sir Chunk came in, he's like, what are you crying about?
The pants.
And I was like,
this damn pants.
Pants book. So, I mean, like, there's not much to say. Like, if you like the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants books, you'll probably like it. It'll be like a reminder of why you liked it. It's like a nostalgic throwback. If you aren't a Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants person, don't start here. That wouldn't make any sense. Then I read The Curse of Penryth Hall, and I wanted to love this because this cover is gorgeous, and it's like gothic mystery set in like Cornwall in the 1920s, like everything I wanted. It just didn't work because it felt like, so I think there's like two kinds of gothic horror or gothic mysteries. There are the ones that are actual gothic horror and mysteries, the 17 and 1800s kind of stuff. And then there's like modern gothic, where like it might sometimes be set in like older times, but usually it's not too far back and it's more contemporary kind of stuff, but like with the same vibe. But in this way, it's like a modern person writing in the 1920s, and it just felt very like an attempt at like trying to recreate something that like this writer isn't living, and so sometimes I feel like I just get so hung up on like this book in particular. What bothered me the most is I could feel the writing, and I don't like when I can sense the writing in a book. Like, I want to just read the book, and like, yes, I like when it's like beautifully written, but I don't want to like picture the person crafting the book. And it felt too much like I could feel the craft. And that only makes sense probably to some people, but like, it bothers me. It's something that really bothers me. And so I just didn't enjoy it because I just felt really like detached. So the next one is The City Where We Once Lived. And I really loved this, but one of the problems I had with this book, so I loved, like, it's a dystopian story about a guy basically living in a city after like climate change has essentially destroyed the city. And it's very interesting. I just loved, like, I like the way it was written. It's very like quick, kind of Hemingway poetic, like, it's short sentences and it's like short thoughts. So I enjoyed the way it was written. But one of the things that I didn't totally understand, and maybe that's because of the way it was written, is there's a little bit of a hint towards like he has this trauma that he's like still hung up on, the thing that has happened to him in his past. And as we get more and more of it revealed, it sounded like a lot of it was like his fault, whether accidentally or deliberately, but like not totally deliberately, but through some of his own deliberate choices, or if it was totally accidental. And I was kind of lost as to like how much of it was his like choices that led him to the situation. And I kind of had a hard time like continuing to root for him and for things to work out if like these things happen because of his own choices. So I was kind of like, wait, I don't know if I want you to have a redemption arc. So I mean, it's kind of good. I like having like those. I like being left a little bit with those moral quandaries. Because like, is it that bad? Like, should I hold that against this character? But I was like a little bit towards the end of like, I don't know how I feel. I think this is going to be a series. So like maybe some of that will be revealed later too. The next one was The Music Was Just Getting Good, which is a collection of poetry written in like mixtape format. And it's kind of cool because like the first half of the book is written, there's a bunch of poems. And then the second half is those blackout poems. So it's only like some of the words most of the poems blacked out. So it's like the poem has like a second poem in it. And I really liked both concepts. And I liked a lot of the poems, but there were like 90-something poems on each side. And I kind of feel like it would have been better if they had just gone for like what a mixtape would have, which would be like 15 or 20 poems, probably max. Maybe you could get away with like 30, but like, I think if you cut it down a lot, it felt a lot like every poem they wrote was just put into the book rather than like selecting maybe the good ones. Like, so some of them I was like, these aren't very good. All right, so then I read the arc of Welcome to Arkham, which is an illustrated guide to Arkham, which is from Arkham Horror. It's a game. All like based on Lovecraftian like myths and lore, and then they have like Dunwich and Innsmouth and Kingsport, and I loved it. And the art and the visuals are gorgeous, and obviously I don't think an e-galley can like do it justice. So I put on my Christmas list for next year because it comes out, I think in April maybe. So I definitely want to get a copy of this because it's just beautiful. So it's probably a small audience but if you're an Arkham Horror person, I think the art is just going to blow you away, and it's definitely probably a must-have. Then I read The Signalman. Sir Chunk read this with me. This is a ghost story by Charles Dickens. Pretty traditional Victorian ghost story. So it's only like 9 pages, so it's not like a long ghost story. And it does everything you expect of a Victorian ghost story. Like, it's kind of creepy, got a good mood, pretty well written. Actually, like, is a ghost story. Like nowadays, sometimes they have ghost stories and they're like, right. But,
It has what probably would have been considered a twist back then.
Yeah.
But at this point, it's super obvious because you've seen it so many times that, like, it's not really a twist for us. But back then, when they were, like, counting their coals and stuff and dying of various diseases at 37, they were probably like, oh, cool, what a twist.
Yeah, and like I enjoyed it a lot because like I don't like a lot of modern short stories. I just think like the short story is not an art that modern writers are as well versed at.
Well, it's like anything else. It doesn't make any money, so not many people do it.
Right, where obviously they publish. That's why we have people, we're going to get to Stephen King a little bit, but like Stephen King and Ray Bradbury, those people, they were good because that was still a really popular format. People bought a lot of magazines. But no one really buys short stories as much anymore. So, and then I read Stay Awake by Megan Golden, which I really liked. But one of my problems with it is it was super compelling. So, like, don't get me wrong, like, I enjoyed it. I read through it really, really fast. Very entertaining, and I really like her writing. But the problem is it's a mystery. And it's about this girl who, when she falls asleep, she can't remember anything from the last 2 years. So it's kind of like Memento. And so she's trying to force herself to stay awake because there's, like, essentially she's been accused of a murder. And, but she doesn't remember anything, so everyone's like trying to find her, and so she doesn't know who she can trust. But the problem is, like, you're introduced to a handful of characters, and like eventually you know who did it well before it's revealed, because there's not really anyone left. And like one of the things I don't like in mysteries is when they do that, when they don't, and it's very hard. And I have I think another one I mentioned like a little bit later. It's a very hard line to walk, is like too much or too little. Because sometimes you have too few characters. Like this one I thought had too few, because like there's not enough people that could have done it. And then sometimes you have too many people, and it's like, literally, is every human being on Earth carrying around a dark secret? Because, like, at some point it starts to become ridiculous. So, it's a very tough line to walk. And I'm not saying, like, I would be any better at it. But, like, I do think that's one of the challenges with mysteries. Is, like, giving someone enough characters to feel like they can work to solve it. But there's enough, like, potential for them to be wrong. But also not just having them go, I don't know, there's 90 billion people in this book. So, then I read, well, we both kind of read 1-star reviews, which is just a short collection of 1-star reviews. It was funny. Could have been longer. I kind of wanted to give it a 1-star review on Goodreads just to be funny. But I don't, as you know, I only rate things that are 5 stars on Goodreads. And everything else I just kind of shelve in my own little, like, shelving process. So I didn't want to give a 1-star review. But I just sometimes think 1-star reviews are hilarious.
Yeah, it was kind of fun, although brief.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. So then I read Zombie's Christmas Carol, and it was okay. I think my problem with it is, like, I do love anything that's a Christmas Carol spin-off, so I'm automatically going to like it to some degree. The art's really good. They did a really good job of, like, trying to stick as closely to the original text. But the problem is, Christmas Carol is a ghost story. So, like, trying to combine a ghost story with a zombie story just kind of felt like a lot to try to pull off. And it didn't really pull together in a way that I think was, like... Also, I don't really like zombies. But I just love Christmas Carol. So, I mean, it was fine. But, like, I think it was a bit of a struggle for me just because, like, it's not my thing. But again, I think, like, they did a good job. So if you're into zombies and you like Christmas Carol, maybe it will work better for you. Maybe you won't feel like it's too much happening with, like, a ghost story and a zombie story. But basically, essentially, instead of, like, helping people, Scrooge has to help people, but he has to help stop all the poor who have now become zombies because they're hungry and they're, like, the hungry death. So they're just, like, hungry zombies. So it's a little much.
We all deep down,
yeah,
just hungry zombies.
So then I read The Widow of Pale Harbor, which is another Gothic. This is set in the 1800s in Maine, and it's like this murder mystery, and it goes back and forth between these sort of two characters. Like, the female character is considered like she's called a witch by everyone in town, and then there's the new pastor in town, and then the murders are, like, following, like, hints of Edgar Allan Poe's short stories, because he's, like, the new upstart writer that everybody's talking about. And there was a lot I liked about this. I would say it was like a solid middle of the road kind of thing. The romance element, I didn't need. Some of it felt like a little over the top. Some of it was a little melodramatic, which is kind of the Gothic thing, but, like, a little too much though. And I think my biggest challenge is, like I said earlier with Chris of Penryth Hall, is I thought this was better, but I just felt like it was a little too trying to be 19th century. Like, I'd just rather have it be set in, like, the 80s or something. Then I read Red, White, and Royal Blue, which is a very popular romance. And I was like, well, I'll read this. Maybe I just don't like Emily Henry. Maybe I do like romance. And I do like some. We'll find I did like one, but this was seriously the most irritating group of people I have ever read. And all I kept seeing is how good everyone loved the representation because it's like a queer love story. But it was, like, way too much. Like, and it wasn't just because it's, like, a queer love story. It was, like, the characters are super unlikable. And there's so much pop culture, like, references dropped that I just wanted to, like, I was so angry. I just found myself really angry. I hate when people try to drop too many pop culture references. Like, it depends on why. Like, I haven't read Ready Player One, but I think, like, Ready Player One could work. But, like, I don't know. It just didn't work for me. It felt too trying to be in the moment. And, like, the pop culture references aren't, like, pop culture references that will, like, last. You know, like, sometimes, like, if somebody makes a reference, like, Back to the Future, you're like, okay, it's a pop culture reference, but like, I'm not worried about 20 years from now that someone's not going to know what that is. But like, if you're referencing like some TikTok influencer, what are the chances in 10 years anyone is going to know who that is? And I don't know. It just bothered me. Anyway, the next one is the dinner party. And this is the opposite of Stay Awake. So this one had too many people, too many things happening. It's a cold case, essentially, about this baby who's kidnapped. Or maybe kidnapped. They don't know. The baby went missing. And these 4 couples who are down the street, because it was the 70s, so they left all the kids at home. And then the parents would, like, check in on the kids every hour or so. And the last time they go to check in, the baby's missing. And then it also has nowadays where, like, the mom, who was the sister of the missing baby, 40 years ago, is now an adult. And her kids are, like... And then somebody shows up and says she's, like, the missing baby. And so, like, there's a lot going on. One, there's, like, a podcast. And I don't know what it is. But apparently, like, every author wants to be a podcaster now. So there's, like, podcasts in every book now. But this one, like, not only were there too many things happening, essentially what happens is all of the sort of people who were part of that evening that were at this dinner party that were suspects or could have been involved in the disappearance, they're all kind of crap people, especially the men for some reason. They're, like, terrible people. And then the attitude is whenever they, like, get interviewed in, like, during, like, their court cases and during, like, the investigations and then now on the podcast, they're like, well, it was a different time. But, like, what happens is we find out, and it's not even related to the plot of, like, but one of the, everybody has a secret. So one of the guy's secrets is he's a school principal, and he's, like, it's basically hinted at that he's, like, having sex with a bunch of students and, like, essentially, like, grooming them and possibly raping them. And then the attitude is, oh, it was a different time. We just didn't want anyone to know our secrets. And so that's essentially how they could get away with, like, basically no one wanted to have too much of their lives dug into. So they basically let this kind of baby go missing. But I was like, am I supposed to, like, be okay with the fact? And then there was never any comeuppance for this fact that this guy was, like, a rapist of children. And I don't know, that was a bit much for me. So I don't know. I didn't like it. It was too much of a thing. So then moving on, I read The Bad Guys, which is apparently this is where the movie is. It's based on this, where the big bad wolf, is trying to gather the villains in all these sort of, like, kids books together and try to become the good guys. And so he gets a piranha, a snake, and a shark, and they decide they're going to be the good guys now. And it's super, super funny. It's a graphic novel, but it's, like, absolutely hilarious. Like, there's one point where he's like, okay, so let's imagine there's a cat in a tree. What are we supposed to do? And, of course, all the bad guys are like, eat it? And he's like, we're not going to eat it. So then he's, like, telling them how, like, they're going to save the cat, and the goal is to save the cat. And he's like, so what are we not going to do? And then it cuts to, like, a panel of, like, the snake, the piranha, and the shark all going, we're not going to eat it. And it's just, I don't know. I can't wait to see this movie. It was hilarious. I thought this was absolutely just super, super funny. I'm not going to go into too much detail on one of the good guys because I want to do a full review for this. This comes out on January 9th, and this is a book from Gillian Flynn Books. So I was like, you have me at Gillian Flynn. Because I love her stuff. And this is about, essentially, it says, like, supposedly things are better for women. There's good guys out there, but then why are all women afraid to walk alone at night? And essentially it's about these 2 women who are walking the coast in Britain, and they're trying to raise awareness for violence against women. And that's happening. And then there's this guy who's his wife has left him, and he's like one of the good guys, and he's all sad about his wife. And then he kind of starts like a friendship with this woman where they're living in, like, by the coast where these girls are passing. So the first part is told from his perspective, and then the middle is told from another character's perspective, and the third part is kind of told in a little bit in one character's perspective and also through social media and podcasts. And this book, like, again, I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to go into too much, and I'm going to do a longer review anyway for when it comes out. I loved it, but it is very, very, like, it's rage-inducing, but it's also, like, leaves you go, like, it's very thought-provoking, because it's like, you know, yeah, you're like, okay, men are awful, but also, like, the women are kind of awful in plenty of ways. A couple of the different women, there's different things going on, and it's like everyone in this is kind of unlikable. But, like, if you're one of those, like, not all men people, you're not going to like it because, like, yeah, we know it's not all men, but it's a lot of men. So if you're one of them, which Sir Chunk is not, thankfully.
No tall foxes.
You know, you're probably not going to like it because you're going to be like, oh, man-hating. But it's not man-hating. It's just drawing attention to violence against women, which is a legitimate issue. But it definitely isn't, like, easy. Like, it doesn't give you easy solutions or answers, and it definitely makes you think about, like, how far, like, to get attention for topics, and I don't know. I don't think this is a very good cover, though, and I did say that in my, like, ARC reviews. I was like, I think this cover doesn't sell what this book is, because it looks a little cuter, or, like, domestic thriller, and it really isn't. It's, like, very, like, socio-political sort of commentary. So then I read Heartstopper 1 through 4 in one morning, and I'm waiting on hold for 5, and 6 comes out, I think. I don't know when it's coming out, probably next year or the year after. And this is, I'm going to watch the Netflix series at some point too, but this is basically about 2 guys who are gay in school, and it's a romance, it's a graphic novel, and I really enjoyed the first couple, because it was, like, super cute. And, like, usually, like, I find with, like, queer romances, it's, like, it's oftentimes there's, like, all this horrible tragedy around it. Like, being gay is, like, oh, here's all these horrible things that gay people go through. And I'm not saying they don't, but also, like, I'm sure if you're gay, it's, like, really frustrating to be like, does every book have to be about, like, these horrible things? Can't it just be, like, a cutesy romance like everyone else can get? So I like that. And then they do start, by, like, the third book, they do start digging into, like, bullying and some mental health stuff and some of the fear of coming out. And they do address those things. And it gets a little darker, but it's still very, very cute. And it's just very, like, I think it's just so nice to read, because it's, like, I mean, it's fairly, in a way, it's fairly cliche. But I think the fact that it's cliche is, like, makes it really, like, really good. Because you're not, like, reading it and it being, like, this cliche romance. And it's nice that it's a queer romance that feels cliche. Because it's, like, it just feels so normal, you know? Like, it's not, like, it's a gay romance, you know? So I just really enjoyed it. And I can't wait to read more of it. And I guess she has other books, and I might read them. I don't know if, like, it'll feel like more of the same, so I don't know if I want to do that. But anyway, so then just quickly, I did my Reindeer Readathon. So those were the prompts. You had seen them before. There were 9 actual prompts, and then 5 bonuses. And if you did all of that, you also could do an extra bonus. And I did all of them. And as you can see, my plan did not go as planned. I ended up changing everything in my first 9 prompts except for Mystery of Raspberry Hill. And then on my second one, I changed all of the prompts. So I wasn't very good at, like, following. This is why, like, with readathons, I need options. So that's where I'm at. I finished that, and I read a ton of books this month. And I'm very excited, and I can't wait for 2024. And now Sir Chunk's going to tell you about his books, even though he's been sitting quietly for some reason. I thought he would, like, pop in and say some things.
No, man, this video is already way too long. The last thing we do is make it longer.
All right, so you talk about your 5 books.
All right, so Nothing Lasts Forever, Roderick Thorpe. This is the book Die Hard's based off of. And it's pretty good. It's fun. It's got some of the key Die Hard moments, you know, the blowing up the elevator shaft and stuff, and, like, jumping off the building. And, of course, the main setup is roughly the same. He goes to this party to visit his daughter, not his wife. And he runs into these terrorist guys. It's not as good in a lot of ways. In most ways, it's kind of crappier. There's one change near the end that I thought was hilarious and much darker than in the movie. But for the most part, if you want to see like I mean, I know this is the original, so it feels weird saying this, but like a more sort of like crappier version of Die Hard, even though it's based on in book form. This is, it's fine. It'll work. It's kind of fun for an action movie. It's nice to see the similarities and differences. All right, so If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler by Calvino Italo. This gets credit for being very different, right? It's got a style kind of set up that I haven't really seen before. So I think a lot of people will really like and appreciate this book for its sort of like non-traditional delivery. A lot of it's written in the second person, which is hard to pull off. I really dislike that tremendously. I don't think he pulled it off at all, but some people like it. And basically it's this guy and this girl who meet each other as they buy the same book. And after like 10 pages, the rest of the pages in the book are blank. And so they go on this this hunt separately. They occasionally cross paths looking for the continuation of this book. But it's just a bunch of sort of like doopy setups to keep having them find the wrong book and read the first 10 pages of a story and then have the story cut off in the middle. There's no ending, it's just like a dead cut off in the middle. And he does this 10 different times. So you read the beginning of 10 stories that just end. There's no ending. They just cut off in the middle. That's super frustrating. And the frame story is just constantly telling you what you're doing and what you're thinking, which is never what I was doing or thinking. So again, it's original, overwhelmingly pretentious and frustrating. I borderline hated it, but I could see it being really popular with some people. And if you want to read something that's very different, this is an excellent choice.
Yeah, so the only thing you really liked is that like he tried something.
Yeah, I respect the unique effort, but I really, really dislike the book. I just hate when there's no, just like, I don't mind an ambiguous ending, but literally it's like, and then they open the door and the story just ends. You know what I mean? There's nothing else. Like, he was curious who the murderer might be as he arrived at the train station, and that's it. That's just, this, you know what I mean? It's not like it's a stunning or a surprise ending. It just cuts off in what should be the middle, and you never get back to it. And this happens 10 times. So by like the third time, like I'm reading this story knowing it's going to cut off. So not only am I not invested, but I'm already irritated while I'm reading it. Anyway, next thing I read was Just After Sunset by Stephen King, a short story collection. It's got 13 stories in there. This came out like 15 years ago.
Yeah, you already did the whole review.
Yeah, I had a whole review of it, so I'm not going to give you too much detail. But this is an excellent short story collection. I was pleasantly surprised because this is, again, in what I consider sort of the era of bad Stephen King. But he does have a couple good things mixed in, and this is really good collection. If you want a short story collection, this is excellent. Suitcase of Seaweed. This is a fairly contemporary poetry collection. Is it Janet Wong?
Yeah.
Janet Wong. And basically, it's about how she has sort of a diverse cultural background where she's part Korean and part Japanese, I think. I apologize if I forget. I think she's half Korean, half Japanese. And so she has sort of 3 segments of this poetry book, and one's about her Korean history and lifestyle and culture, one's about the Japanese, and one's about her as an American. And it's pretty interesting. And if you like poetry, and you like sort of contemporary poetry that delves into like cultural background and traditions and stuff like that.
Chinese and Korean.
Oh, sorry, Chinese and Korean, not Japanese. I apologize. I read this, I didn't read it that long ago, but I should have remembered. I didn't. Whatever. Anyway, if you're into sort of like contemporary poetry of this sort, then it's enjoyable.
And then...
All right, and then I read Dr. Sleep by Stephen King, which I was pleasantly surprised. This, of course, is the follow-up to The Shining. And I read a few... I didn't read, like, summaries or anything, but I heard a few bits about this, how, like, the villain's really cool, and it was, like, a nice story. It's like, okay, well, people say a lot of good stuff about these books, and usually they're disappointing. This was awesome. I was surprised. This was like reading an old-school Stephen King.
Yeah, 2 good Stephen King this month.
Yeah, this was like reading an old-school throwback Stephen King, where you have, like, really excellent, well-developed characters. Villains are cool. The heroes are cool. The dynamics between the characters good. You get a multi-layered plot that comes together well and is not like just dumping plot lines into the ocean for no reason like he often likes to do and rambling for no reason. There's not much of that. The pacing is good, and the ending is very satisfying and solid. So yeah, I thought this was great. This is a very rare 5-star read for me, and the best Stephen King book I've read in a very long time.
This is on my 2024 plans, I believe.
Okay. Did I read anything else?
No, you're reading something right now, and you're
right.
wrapping that up,
Yeah.
and then I might read something else. But I think we'll call it a day because we got a lot of other things going on this month, so we're gonna this will wrap it up, and then we'll just fill you in if we, whatever carries. If it doesn't carry into January and we finish it, we'll just add it to January. I'm sure you won't mind.
Yes,
So.
and you won't know. We can always just lie to you. Ha ha.
All right.
Boop.
Bye. End of 2023.
Boop. 2020 boop.